Welcome to The Kingstonian, a podcast that profiles people who are passionate about what they do for a living, what organization they belong to, or the community they are a part of. Here is your host, Dave Cunningham.
Thank you, Steve. Hello there and welcome. Our guest in this episode plays piano, clarinet, accordion, sings, dances, prances, and has played Bermuda to Bosnia, New Orleans to the North Pole, and has recorded and toured with the Cowboy Junkies, Sarah Harmer, Pat Temple, and has performed with many others. He has been a resident of Kingston for several years, keeping busy playing with numerous local bands such as Bloom, Pico de Gallo, Ghetto Express, the River Cats, and various other jazzy combos. Here is our conversation with Spencer Evans. I thought we would start at the beginning, which usually is a logical place to start, and this whole program is about exploring people's passions. Music is obviously one of yours, and I'm wondering why music?
Music was just the thing that I attached to as a very young child. I was singing in church choirs and reading these Anglican musical services, that had Latin words in them, and I loved the way the notes were on the page and the fact that I could read them, and I was a quick reader and quick music reader. So I just had Anglican church choirs. They weren't that exciting, but that just sort of started me off into music, and then piano lessons, which again I was just kind of okay at. I just had some very nice nuns teach me piano when I was younger, and then a couple of other students, and I kept in singing choir, which is really, if you know Anglican church choirs, this one in Belleville was very musically oriented. It was a lot of the very high English anthems, the kind of stuff that St. George's would do, and King's College, Cambridge, and and a lot of modern stuff. And the guy who was our main choir master, Barry Ford, and his wife Linda, they were both incredible pianists, organists, sight readers. They could read anything and play it with their feet as well as with their hands, and pulled stops. They were really world-class musicians and organists. And then getting into musical theater in high school, like I just never had an athletic bone in my body. Didn't come from a family of athletes, and and plus, as a kind of shy, if you can imagine me as a shy teenager, diminutive, not a tough guy, and playing piano and entertaining my friends after music class, which I played clarinet, because this is the whole thing. I was playing piano, but I needed an instrument in high school, and I just basically went to the back of the high school music room and picked out a clarinet off the shelf just because it looked like the right size case for a little guy like me, and I didn't even know that it was a clarinet. It had CL on it, but I just didn't really put it together. I was just not exposed to band instruments until grade 9, and this was in Trenton, and then finished off high school in Belleville, and both my parents play music, and we always grew up with sing-alongs at the cottage, even though my grandfather died in 73 when I was just a kid, 5 or 6 years old. I still remember everybody smoking and drinking and gathering around the piano and singing all the tunes from the Reader's Digest family treasury, of Ain't She Sweet and 5'2" and all this jazzier stuff like "Embrace Me, My Sweet Embraceable You." All these drunk adults, playing, and so either way, I just grew up with really very non-funky, non-bluesy, everything from church music to Broadway show tunes to I just didn't really have any cool musical tastes, and then I eventually discovered blues and Ray Charles and Jerry Lee Lewis. Probably when I was about 13 or 14 or 15, and the Doors, of course, Ray Manzarek, the keyboard work on all of those Doors tunes is so good, and I had older sisters, so in the 70s, Supertramp and Led Zeppelin 4, and these albums were around, and I realized that reading music was a drag. By the time I was about 14 or 15 years old, reading piano music, and I was playing some Chopin, I was playing some Bach, and some Debussy. Very, very good stuff. Very good stuff for a pianist, to learn. But I wasn't a pianist. I was a guy who heard a song on the radio and wanted to play it. I would have memories of all kinds of melodies and harmonies and chords and songs in my head all the time, and that's just something that's always been the case with me from what I can remember.
Were you the kind of guy who would hear something on the radio and be able to play it right away?
Well, not right away. No, I
could
wouldn't say like that. Yeah. But if you hear a song enough times, you have to. Yeah. I certainly would. Let's just say that, if there was something bothering me, like a chord progression I couldn't get or something that didn't sound quite right, it would bother me until I figured it out. So it's certainly, I don't think music is ever that instant, that you can.
Now, I think that based upon what you told me about your growing up, that you had no choice but to pursue music, given all the influences around you.
Well, it's funny because in high school, up to grade 12, I honestly had no idea what I was going to do. I even considered the Coast Guard because I thought, well,
really?
Of course, I would never have gotten in, but I just thought, well, I like to be on boats. I'd done some sailing with the St. Lawrence too here in Kingston, and I'd sailed to Sarnia. We had some, I don't know, I grew up in sailing little tiny boats with my dad, and it's like I don't know. That was just something that flashed, but really, I didn't really know what I was going to do. And then grade 13, a Queen's grad, fresh from on his first music teaching job, came to my high school in Belleville, John McFarlane, and he lives in Kingston now. And so I see him on the street and I see him at gigs occasionally. But he was the guy who told me, you have to go to Queen's music. This is what you have to do. Mm-hmm. And because I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know if I was just going to pump gas or I had no other talents or skills or interests. So,
well, listen, Spencer, I was 3/4 of the way through university before I figured out what I was going to do. So, and it had nothing to do with academics. But anyway, are you familiar with the name Henry Cuesta?
Oh, yeah. I remember Henry Cuesta and Lawrence Welk, of course. Yes. Yeah. Amazing clarinet.
When I first started, I started work at CKWS in town, working on FM back in the days when you would play very nondescript pop music, I guess is what you would call it. And because he was Canadian, at least he was labeled as being Canadian on the record jackets, he got a lot of airplay on the station. And then I saw him pop up on Lawrence Welk for a number of years. So I thought, he might have been an influence in one way, shape, or form to the clarinet side of your personality.
Well, it's hard to really pinpoint an influence on the clarinet playing just because I never... I never really figured out how to play like anybody. And I mean, as much as I love, I could give you a long list of, and obviously there were famous clarinet players growing up, like Henry Cuesta, probably being the only one. But, I couldn't really play clarinet at all. Because I did 4 years of a classical music degree on clarinet, and I could sort of improvise a little bit, but piano was the thing that I could play. That is the thing I could improvise on. Somebody said, play blues, play rock and roll, play a show tune, play a movie theme, or whatever, play some jazzy stuff. And then I would be, and that's jazz is another thing where I'm not a school jazz musician like my son is, who's a dynamite jazz musician who just can unlock all these harmonies and play these incredibly complicated improvised patterns. And I'm not that guy at all. I'm more of an all-purpose musician, singer and clarinet player. Mm-hmm. So really the main influence on clarinet for me would have been just the fact that I needed to learn how to play to be in this band. And the band was Pat Temple and the High Lonesome Players. And this would have been 1990. And my friend happened to be the son of my favorite music professor, one of my favorite music professors, Peter Allen. And he said to me, Spence, you got to come and join this band. We do original music, and we might be going on tour. And I was like, really, come on. And sure enough, I met this guy in Kingston, and his music was, he called it hillbilly jazz. So it's all singer-songwriting, and this guy is a dozen or so years older than me, and he has a very strong Bob Dylan influence. His music is very literate, and very complicated stories happen in the song. And there's a swing to it, there's a bounce to it, and there's a lot of jazz chords in it. And he needed a clarinet player, or he wanted a clarinet player. And the stuff that me and this violinist Dave Allen came up with over the years we were on tour together, improvising these beautiful clarinet, violin lines along with this music. And some of it's been recorded, but most of it was just kind of a memory of those beautiful days on the road 30 years ago, because it was Pat who got me originally on the road doing music, like original music. And that ended up, opening doors, big time for me, right?
So when you talk about opening big time doors, they would be with whom?
Well, with Cowboy Junkies, because we were on their label, and we had just driven basically 4 days across Canada, like nonstop from the West Coast, and just so we could get to this gig at the Horseshoe. And we got there, and it was basically like show up with 3 hours to spare. Just last time, we had been in Vancouver, and so we were all disheveled, but we played this gig, and they were very impressed with my piano playing and clarinet playing abilities, even though I still knew that I was just still a fresh out of music school clarinet player, but I had something, and it wasn't jazz though. It wasn't Henry Cuesta. It wasn't Pete Fountain, because it was just nowhere near as good as any of those guys. And I certainly am maybe getting a little closer to that, but as a jazz clarinet player, that is I've always felt like, and the clarinet side work I've done with Good Lovelies, with Jill Barber, with Sarah Harmer, you could sort of say, well, it's kind of a jazzy clarinet solo he threw in there, but it's not like a jazz clarinet solo, not like somebody, like a real serious jazz clarinetist would do,
So at this particular point, you've sort of landed in Kingston and you're staying here at this particular point, or are you still doing touring after you hit town with the Cowboy Junkies?
Oh no, it was just back and forth. You know how tours go. We did I think we did 5 or 6 months internationally, and it was amazing. I mean, there were just some incredible stories I could tell, from playing on the Tonight Show to meeting celebrities to just the fact that you go from being in a stinky van with 5 other guys, driving across, what it's like to drive across Canada and back to Vancouver Island and back. Lots of long, hot, you're in a noisy old van filled with gear, and then it's like, oh, now I'm in an airport, and there's people taking care of my gear, and they're taking us from a tour bus to a hotel, and we're playing at Royal Albert Hall, or we're playing at the Chicago Theater, the Beacon Theater in New York, or wherever. It was always like the best theater in town, whatever American city we were in. It was it was spoiling into a sense, but yes, I had to move somewhere. So after floating around in Kingston.
Before we move you back to Kingston, tell us about being on the Tonight Show. This is the Jay Leno version of the Tonight Show, right?
Oh yeah.
What was that like?
When you see any band performing on a talk show, you have to kind of go inside their headspace. They haven't had time to process the experience. They're on and off buses and in and out of hotels, and it's hard to sleep on a vehicle that's going 70 miles an hour over American roads, no matter how nice your tour bus is. Still in kind of a blocked in little bunk on this thing, and and of course you're just kind of disoriented all the time, because tours are not, it's not a pleasure cruise. So, let's take a nice casual tour of the backstage area of the studios in Burbank. It's like, no, it's like, off the bus, follow me, come this way, get your badge, go here, go there. But it was interesting in the sense, our roadie, John Farnsworth, he said to me, oh, that's Gene. And I was like, what do you mean that's Gene? He said, that's Gene, the dancing machine. And if you remember the Gong Show, he the reason he was on the Gong Show because he was a backstage employee, and and he had the same look, this big straw hat, the jean shorts, and everybody else is wearing suits and looking very efficient and looking like, you know, they really want to suck up to the next person up the chain. And there's this big dude casually walking down the hall with his big straw hat. And John Farnsworth ran up to him and said, "Oh my God, you're Gene. You know, I grew up watching you in Canada." And Gene was very gracious and said, "Yeah, hey, you know," because obviously your average person isn't hanging around backstage at the Tonight Show because if they're there, it's because they have a job to do. So he assumed that, you know, we were a band, and he was very friendly with us, and he signed the back of our roadie's jacket. Other than that, Jay Leno was very nice. I think Annie Potts was a guest that night as well. It was kind of just a very short experience. It was a little nervous, as you can imagine. You know, I was 25 at the time, so this is 1992. So we are going back a bit here in time. And
so what's going through your mind when you're sitting at the piano? It's piano you're playing, or the clarinet?
I played a bit of keyboard and a bit of clarinet. I actually did my clarinet solo. That is the song that I played clarinet on that whole band.
What's going through your head as you're on stage performing when you realize that you are on the Tonight Show, which is obviously coast to coast coverage? Are you thinking about the music? You thinking about the atmosphere, the opportunity?
Neither. Well, the music is the job. Music is the job, and you're thinking about the job. Yeah. You are hired to play music professionally. You don't let your teammates down if you were playing a football game, you know, or a baseball game, and if you all of a sudden were in the big stadium instead of playing at McGaffin Park in Kingston, all of a sudden you're there at Yankee Stadium, and you know
you're still playing baseball.
I hate to make it like a sports analogy, but I'm just saying, like, you're focused on the job. You know, I know that I have to play this A flat chord here, and then this D flat chord, and then I have to pick up my clarinet solo, and I have to play the little trill and do the little thing. And the whole time I played with the Cowboy Junkies, I only played clarinet on one song, and I always played it at the end of the song. I don't pick up the clarinet until the very end of the song. So it's a ballad. It takes forever. It's like 4 minutes. And then finally, after 4 minutes, the clarinet comes in, and it's like 12, 13 second long clarinet solo. And
that's it.
And that's it. So you can't, you just have to be ready. Like what? And, you know, you can have nightmares about this stuff if you got stressed out about things like this. Yeah. You pick up your clarinet on international TV and the key falls off, or you just go squeak for some reason. You're nervous. But, you know, hey, by that time, you know, you're a hardened professional. Like, I think we got to the Tonight Show at least halfway through the tour. So I'd already been in and out of big rooms. I'd already been in and out of situations, you know, where you're just trained. You know, it's not like you're just sitting around Kingston, all of a sudden you're flying to the Tonight Show and then playing the Tonight Show and then flying back, you know, or something. You know, you're just, yeah. It was just another thing. It was just another thing. Really, it gets to the point that you don't really get nervous about any kind of performance, whether it's recorded, whether it is a big deal, you know, in one way or another. You just enjoy the moment. And if you're not enjoying the moment and you're not making the best music you can, and so if you're supposed to make the best music you can because you're a professional, then you have to, you know, train your brain to just, okay, you got this. You know, no one's going to die if you hit a bad note. You know, you're not a paramedic or a cop or something, you know, with a split-second decision to make. And it's like, oh, I could have done that. And it's like, oh, I could have played the A flat there. Shoot, you know, oh, sorry, that person's dead now or something, you know. So, you know,
You talk about that particular tour that you did with the Cowboy Junkies. You also, I read somewhere, did a tour of military bases overseas in support of the military. Tell us a little bit about that. Who were you playing with then?
Oh, that's a fun thing. I did that in 1999, 2000, and our, you know, Kingston musicians are a pretty friendly lot. We're, you know, we've played in a lot of bars in Kingston for many years, and so a musician calling another musician for a gig is just kind of a casual thing. It's not a big deal. And I got the call from Rick Flanagan, who's a tenor sax man in town, and one of the guys who was responsible for me playing music in Kingston, because he got me some of my very first professional gigs in Kingston, playing with his band. Yep. So he called me and he said, there's a chance that somebody we know has got a contract to do a Canadian Forces show tour. And would you be interested in joining the band? And basically you would back up entertainers, you'd back up singers, and that's it. And then I didn't really know any of the details, but of course I said yes for you, Flanny. Sure, sounds like fun. And so my kids were really young at the time, so just babies. And I thought, well, it is a military tour, but it's not going to be dangerous or anything, and I got to go with Bob Arledge, who's a veteran bass player. I just played with him the other night. And Flanny and Matt Woodward, who is a really incredible guitar teacher and guitarist in Kingston, and Matt, trying to put it together, and me. Oh yeah, and the drummer, he died a few years ago, but he wasn't from here. He was our Ottawa connection who got the gig. Either way, we got on a Hercules. We flew up to the North Pole. We flew up to CFB Alert, which is a 24-hour flight in a Hercules, by the way. So that takes a long time to get up there. In your Arctic gear the whole time, you're in giant mittens and in your white parka and your giant survival boots, just in case the plane goes down somewhere up there. You got to be ready to survive. Oh my God! So the plane did go down up there. They made us watch that movie when we were up there too, just to remind ourselves that it can be dangerous. But either way, we went to Alert and we went to Bosnia. So we landed in Croatia. We drove to 5 different peacekeeping camps in Bosnia. Sure.
Let's switch gears a little bit here. Musical theater.
Yeah.
You've done a bit of it in town?
Oh, tons.
Your role in musical theater. So you're the musical director in some of these plays that you participated in, or did you compose music for them? Or
yeah. Well, I've been called a few times to do different types of musical theater in town. And I think one of my first things that I did was with Theatre 5, when Val Robertson was still running Theatre 5 out of the old TED Center. And my good friend Mike Myers, who is a performer as well, who was the other half of the River Cats. We played for 20 years on the Island Queen or more. And he had written children's original music for these fairy tales. And we were doing those at Theatre 5, and so I did all the arranging and music directing for those performances. But I also did stuff for the Grand Theatre for much higher end productions with professional actors from Toronto and directors, and doing the Rocky Horror Picture Show the summer of '95. That was probably one of the greatest professional musical theater experiences I've had, for sure. We were part of a pit band, and I got to do all of the vocal rehearsing and spend 8-hour days rehearsing people, and it was very intense, that. And the Hunchback of Notre Dame, which was a beautifully written show. These are.
What do you like about musical theater, as opposed to performing in clubs or on tour or something like that?
I don't know. I think it's really not my favorite thing to do, just because it is a lot of work. And I think that the good thing about it is, yes, it is not a nightclub. It is not loud. It is not late at night and 2-3 in the morning getting home. So but really a gig is a gig for me, and musical theater is just one of those tools that I have in my toolbox, because I can read a basic piano score, and I can teach singers where to sing, like what, plunk out their notes. This is your note, because they can't just hit it perfectly without some kind of piano guidance. So you're playing the notes for them and plunking them out, and then getting a nice blend with the vocals, and just reminding people when they're flat, sharp, or late, or early on an entrance, and that's all. It's really not a hard job to do, and I've had a lot of fun doing it because the people are just so much fun. It's not really that the material is great. I don't listen to the Rocky Horror Picture Show soundtrack, just because I love it so much, but God, I have every song cemented in my head from the
forever and ever.
hours,
Amen.
forever and ever, and this is the whole thing that, you have to do that repetition in order to get the result. Whereas if you are just calling up musicians who are friends of yours and say, we're playing a gig at Musiki this Saturday, and I got together, this happened last Saturday, and I got together with Bob Arledge at 4:30 in the afternoon, and we spent about a half an hour going through the songs for the evening. So we have a huge 3-hour performance that night, and we spend about a half an hour on going through the songs and the keys and the list.
Should you be telling people about that? That you only spend half an hour to prepare for a 3-hour show?
We know because we know these things already. He was a sub.
Yeah.
So I just had to go over him with the keys, the basic arrangement. And that's it. That's how music works. Yeah. You know what key the song is in, and you know what the head is on a jazz tune, or the introductory statement. And then what happens at the end? Okay, it just does that. Boom. It's just like every other jazz song. The professionalism happens when you're on the stage in the moment. That is, and he did a great job, and we had a great night. And people don't pay money to come and see us. Really, they just show up, and if they feel like tipping the band $5 or $10, then they do so, and if they don't, they won't. And so it's not about the money or the prestige of playing the Musiki, but what it is that you are supplying music for people who are there enjoying it. And I see them. I can see their faces smiling. I can see them wiggling around in their chairs. And one of my friends did actually dance against the wall because he was back in the corner, and they didn't tell him he couldn't dance. So they let him kind of dance around by himself, which was great. People need to dance. People need to interact with music. And I know I do. I mean, I know that without having the gift of live music, in my life, the pandemic was very hard on me, Dave. It was getting to the end, because as a one-man band, I could have the odd gig. I could sit and play piano at a restaurant or something. And I was playing on the tour boats. And that's happening again this year too. But it didn't start until July 17th.
Yeah.
So, and music basically got shut down in December. So from December to July, that was a very dark time for me. And I know it was a dark time for a lot of people. I don't want to point myself out, but it was hard to just kind of figure out who I was. And now that I've had, like, July 17th, I've got countless boat cruises, restaurant gigs, concerts outside, a few parties. Hey, I'm all good now. I've had lots of live music pumping through my body and my voice over the last while. And today is a day off, and I'm very thankful of that.
Well, I think that people tended to forget what impact music had on their lives during the pandemic. And then as the pandemic wore on, they missed it more and more. And you hear so much talk about the importance of bringing live music back and how pumped musicians are, not to mention the people who come and see them at their favorite haunts to enjoy what they're putting out. And I certainly appreciate your enthusiasm, your passion for presenting music the way you want to present music. And I want to thank you for your time today. That was great.
All right, Dave. You take care. All right.
You too.
Okay. All right. All right. Bye.
As he says, supplying the music for people who are there to enjoy it. Spencer Evans was our guest in this episode. If you are in the Kingston area, check out his Facebook page for details on his performances. This episode was recorded in late September 2021 using Zoom.
The theme music for the podcast is Stasis Oasis, written and performed by Kingston musician Tim Aylesworth. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions about any of the episodes, please send a note to thekingstonianpodcast@gmail.com. For details on upcoming guests, follow us on Facebook. The Kingstonian Podcast is hosted by Dave Cunningham and produced in Kingston, Ontario, Canada.